Good evening. My name is Patricia Miles. I am the founder and acting managing director of Image by Design LLC of Accokeek, Maryland. I am an author, I'm an ordained minister, and a counselor. And this presentation is for women of all ages who are ready to receive your inner healing and move forward in your purpose and pass along your legacy to the next generation. The problem we're facing with being able to pass the baton is that we're not ready to pass the baton because the baton is broken. And we are facing a generation who is not forward facing with the future. And so what we need to do is begin to address the spiritual brokenness inside of all of us that has inhibited our ability to thrive. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm 48 years old and I'm a product of the 70s. I was born at the end of 1969 and I was raised in the 70s with 4 siblings, 2 boys, 2 girls, a mother and a father in the household in Cleveland, Ohio. We are what they call PKs or preacher's kids. So from the time I was in my mother's womb, I was in somebody's church. Church was the foundation of us. We were taught how to live a certain type of disciplined life. However, like most households in the 70s, our household was full of secrets. That was the big thing back in the 70s. What goes on in this house stays in this house. Our parents raised their daughters and loved their sons, meaning we were taught certain disciplines that our brothers didn't have to have. So on Saturdays when we were doing chores, the boys were outside playing in the backyard and the girls were on our hands and knees scrubbing scuff marks off of our mother's kitchen floor. So a little bit about my mom. She's a Bishop Winnie Hamilton out of Cleveland, Ohio. Wonderful, wonderful woman, an example of God's love in this earth and his benevolence. She was the product of a very violent first marriage. From that marriage, there were 4 children who were stair steps. So I'm the youngest of those 5 children, and I was raised thinking that we were all a product of this same broken marriage and that this man who was in our household was actually everybody's father. And so what I learned as I grew older, and I mean older as in adolescence, I learned that this man was actually our stepfather, and my 4 siblings were the product of her first marriage, and that I was actually a love child that came along somewhere in the middle. And so, like any other child, you want to know who your biological parents are. So I subsequently found out that this man, who was the best friend of one of my babysitters, was actually my father. And I used to daily sit on this man's lap. He would give me money and everything. And he knew that I was his child, but never revealed himself to me. And so that was one of the biggest secrets in our household that I found out later in life. The second thing that happened was, as my siblings got older and became teenagers, they began to reject the notion of being raised by a stepfather. So those relationships took a downward spiral, and there began to be some level of domestic violence in our household. So every time these situations would break out, the family would send me over to the neighbor's house. And so I found myself as a child standing behind that closed door, fellowshipping with fear and wondering, like, when they open this door, what am I going to encounter? What's actually going on over there? And so as from my adolescent years all the way up to the age of 28, I fellowshipped with that same spirit of fear. And it would just hover around me. Sometimes I would be afraid and not know actually where the fear was coming from, but it would come in the form of almost like a panic attack, and it would cause me to freeze. And I remember as an adult, my husband and I had a house built. It was a beautiful home, And one day, he went to pick up the children from daycare. And I remember opening the door and standing there crying because I was afraid to go into my brand new home. And so those types of incidents that happened in my childhood really played into who I became as an adult. I remember being a part of the Me Too movement before there was a Me Too movement, being sexually assaulted by a family friend and being told to shut my mouth or something worse would happen. And so, we grew up and we put all of those little secrets into a little pea pod and crammed it down on the inside of us and built this world around ourselves and presented this facade of a person to the world who appeared to be confident and strong, and you came from a great background, you're educated, you're smart, and you got all of this going on for you. But for me, honestly, as a full grown vetted adult, I can remember those days when I would put on my makeup, get dressed, I'm ready to go to work, and I'd look at myself in the mirror and just burst into tears because memories would start flooding my mind and take over my emotions at that moment. And I would tell myself, like, you're not beautiful. You can't do this. You're not smart. I ended up actually, I used to be very smart. I was very book smart growing up. I was a straight A student. I was in Who's Who in 1988 amongst American high school students. I was honored by the Ohio Board of Regents and some more stuff because I was just very book smart. My mom was a operation room nurse, and she just didn't play with us. She would tear your report to shreds and make you do it over. We went to Catholic school, so we learned how to read and write. The communication skills were real big, in Catholic school. And so I subsequently gained a academic scholarship to Ohio State, which was the first college on my list of colleges. But unfortunately, I lost my virginity when I turned 18 years old, and I lost my virginity to a drug dealer. And that drug dealer sucked me into his world. I don't know how many of you ever saw that movie, New Jack City, but we were living that life in Cleveland, Ohio, back in the late 80s at the introductory phase of crack. And so there was a lot of money exchanging hands. There was a lot of material gain. And also there were a lot of losses. I lost my academic scholarship to Ohio State University. I lost my virginity and lost my mind, honestly, for a couple of minutes where my family was like, who is this child and where did she come from? I subsequently moved out of my parents' house at 18 and shacked up with this guy for a couple of years. And then one day I realized that I'm going down south really fast. And so I reached out to God. I'm like, as a child, we were preacher's kids, so we learned how to pray. That if we didn't know how to do anything else, we knew how to pay our tithes and how to pray. And so I dropped to my knees and prayed, and I promised God, if you get me out of this situation, I will take off running and never look back. And that night that I prayed that prayer, we were pulled over by 15 police officers, rifles to the windows, hands in the air, boots in the back, face to the pavement. And we were all on our way to jail that night. And suddenly my parents appeared out of nowhere and came and got me and took me back to their house. And I didn't know at the time what happened, but I knew that God had sent an angel to rescue me and to honor that prayer. And so in exchange for him rescuing me, I had to honor that vow that I made to him. And so I took off running into Uncle Sam's Air Force, and I never looked back. I never looked back. I made good on that promise, and I found out that a friend of mine who was on the police force happened to be driving through the McDonald's drive-through that night and saw me and talked to the police, and they allowed him to call my parents. And so if you want to know if I believe and trust God that he can salvage you and that he can put you back in right standing and set you on a course to the future, yes, I believe absolutely. I know that it's him. I know that it's his ultimate plan, and all we have to do is acknowledge that it's his plan and not ours, and then we can go in the direction of our purpose. I did author a book called Butterfly Encounters, and the premise behind this book is to address the issue that I'm addressing right now. Let's look at the spiritual brokenness that is inhibiting our ability to thrive, to pass the baton to the next generation, to pass a whole, not a broken baton, to the next generation, to take our hands and turn someone in this generation in the direction of the future, to have them put their hands in the runner's stance and receive that baton and run freely and wholeheartedly in the direction of their future. In order for us to do this, we all have to be healed and made whole. We all have to have that encounter with the Most High God, or and have our belief system adjusted, and to release that little pea pod that we have with all of our secrets and all of our cares, release it to him and acknowledge that, yes, these things did happen to me. The name of this book is Butterfly Encounters, or Transformative Moments. They are the moments in our lives that have the ability to shapeshift what's in our belief system. Most of these things that we're holding on to happened in our childhood, when we were involuntarily exposed to transformative moments that shaped and molded the way that we think, the way that we believe. And so we start down a path of using those negative experiences as the reason why we behave a certain way. And as we get older and our types of encounters change and become more intense, and we're faced with opportunities to make full-fledged adult decisions on our own, absent the voices of our parents, then we start to realize that I'm not doing so well as an adult. I'm not really thriving. I'm growing older, but I'm not growing in wisdom. I'm not growing in stature. I'm not building a legacy that could be passed on to someone. You find a lot of us in my age group. Like I said, I'm 48 years old. I've encountered a lot of women who said they don't want to get married. I don't want to have any kids. They didn't like the way that they were raised or experiences they had when they were children. And so I wouldn't bring a child into this crazy world. You know, you felt like the world was out of control at some point in your life. And so you don't want to bring a child into a scenario that you can't control. You've probably met people that are control freaks, or they're living their lives inside of this box. A lot of them have a string of letters behind their name because those accomplishments have validated them. But at the end of the day, just like me, they're standing in that mirror with tears flowing where nobody else can see. It's just a moment between you and God where you have your confessional, saying things that you wouldn't dare say in front of other people. About 15 years ago, I went to a women's workshop with one of the elders in our ministry. And during that workshop, I was talking to God about, I need more. Like, life has to be more than this. Like, I'm tired of just being a wife and being a mother. I want to know who Patricia is. I want to know why you sent me here. And I know that this is not it, because I got this emptiness on the inside of me. I have to know. And one of the things that God started talking to me about was the junk that was down on the inside of me. And a lot of it had to do with my resentment of how I was raised. I resented not having a voice. I resented being looked at as the runt in the pack because I was the youngest. I resented all of the secrets. I resented all of the hostility in the household and being told to shut up and stay out of grown folks' business and go sit down somewhere. And then all I get to do is just go to school and be yelled at because I brought home a B instead of an A. So God was like, you have to, forgive your mother. So it moved me to tears. I was like, I love my mother to pieces. I think I'm a pretty good daughter, and I've always been very compliant. So I don't know what you mean. And God just started rolling back the tape and showing me all of the resentment that was in my heart and all of the things that I packed down on the inside of me. And I had built this world around my little pea pod that, was allowed to fester on the inside of me. And so that day I chose to confront my mother, and I talked to her about everything that I had held on to from childhood. And I also shared with her some things that she didn't know. And she looked at me basically like I had 10 heads and said, wow, I thought that I had done a good job sheltering you. She never apologized. Her final words to me on that day were, I hope that you'll be a better mother than I was. And it broke my heart because my intention was not to tell her that she wasn't being a good mother. I really wanted to talk about me and how I felt about you as my mother, not my perception of you as a good or bad mother. And for me, there's a difference. I think that, in terms of the set of circumstances and the hand that she was dealt and fleeing an extremely violent marriage, my mother created a great life for us. She, at any given time, was known to work 3 nursing jobs at one time. And she was determined to be a home owner and, to demonstrate to us that there is life after tragedy. And so I think she did a pretty good job. And additionally, she demonstrated God's love to us. We were always sharing our space with other families. She would clean out our freezer and our closets and give freely to folks who lived in like the projects or anyone who's disparate. We learned how to love, and we love hard. And the sometimes unfortunate part of loving unconditionally is that you end up getting hurt. And so I've personally experienced that hurt in marriage, in the workforce, in the military, and in raising my children. However, what I choose more than those types of encounters, I choose to love the way God told me to love, and that's unconditionally. That's opening up my space, my time, my resources, my heart, my mind to other human beings that have a need. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm starting a movement amongst women, particularly African American women, because we tend to be the backbone of society. When I look up the totem pole and see the pecking order in society, you have white men, white women, black men, and black women laying on their stomachs with everyone couched upon their backs. We are the ultimate multitaskers. We cry ourselves to sleep at night, and we wake up in the morning and go on a rinse and repeat cycle. I've personally experienced this, and it's not necessarily fun, but we do it without blinking an eye because it's how we were raised. And we were raised to keep our mouths shut and keep working. And so today, I want to provoke you to begin to look at these encounters as transformative moments. Don't despise the way you started out. Don't despise the family you were born into. Embrace it. Open up that little pea pod. Go digging. Go on an excavation mission and pull up that pod and open it up and see what's on the inside. See what's been eating you. And make a decision to destroy it. It's got to die. It's like the butterfly. In order to become a beautiful butterfly, a caterpillar has to subject itself to a death, meaning that it goes into a certain position and it begins to spin a cocoon around itself, and around itself for a certain period of time. And then once that time is over, that caterpillar is no more. It arises as this beautiful butterfly that sets out on a mission. And specifically the monarch butterfly it will sustain through repollination and going through the metamorphosis process over and over again, 5 generations of itself. So if you could imagine yourself going through this death, burial, and resurrection process, coming out in full bloom as a monarch butterfly, and then sustaining 5 generations of yourself, that is so powerful to me. That's your reach back capability. You going and you fulfilling purpose, and then you turning around and passing the baton to another generation. Powerful stuff. So I want to offer you the opportunity to get a free copy of this book, Butterfly Encounters, Mastering Life's Transformative Moments, so that you can go on a soul-searching mission and you can get rid of all that old stuff that's holding you down and begin to embrace this beautiful you who has reach back capability. Let's repair that baton. Go get someone else from a younger generation. Turn them in the direction of the future. Coach them along through their healing process. Because we want to get these girls before they become broken remnants of themselves, to where you're now don't even recognize who you are. We want to catch them early and turn them towards the future and put them in the runner stance. People that run relay races, the person you're passing the baton to is already facing the goal, the finish line, and they've got one hand extended in front of them, their feet in the runner stance, and that other hand is backwards, facing you and ready to receive that baton, and they are already running. They're not standing still with their arms folded or their hands in the air or like this. They're in a runner stance, ready to receive that baton and run full throttle towards the future. We need to get some kids excited about facing and embracing the future. They are our future. We're not going to be here. Most of us in my age group have parents that are either aging in place or they've passed on. I've heard about a lot of passing over the past few years. And so we're that next leg. We're the next leg that's going to be passing the baton to those that are going to go and embrace the future and affect positive change in the future. We have to recognize transformative moments and be willing to recreate those moments at every opportunity. Learn how to engage with other human beings. We don't live life on social media. But because people are on social media so frequently, you forget that human engagement is a real thing. Like, there's a time when you're going to have to talk on a telephone or sit across the table or communicate something in writing, not in text acronyms, or other cryptic languages we use online. Social media doesn't have a traffic guard or a traffic light. And so you have to learn how to engage other human beings along life's path. We're going to have these moments all the time. Let me introduce you to my daughter. My daughter, Jasmine Miles, is who I like to call my little Punky Brewster. Punky Brewster was a little girl from a 1990s sitcom who had long pigtails and she wore all these rainbow colors. She was very persnickety. But she was funny and cute. And my daughter's always been that girl. So when she turned 16, she lost her virginity. And like most of us, you lost your virginity and lost your mind. And so from 2009 to 2016, she was dating the same guy. Well, we subsequently found out that the relationship that she was in was abusive, that he would take things from her. He would hit her. He would mainly degrade her and make her feel inferior and insecure. And so in 2016, so she got pregnant in 2015. In 2016, she gave birth to twin boys. one of which was born dead. During this experience at the hospital, the doctors were able to revive the twin A. Twin A was shipped off by medevac to Children's National Medical Center, and his brother, twin B, was admitted to the nursery in the hospital where she gave birth. So during the course of, they're 2 years old now, so during the course of these 2 years, the baby that was born dead and was resuscitated spent the first 5 to 6 months of his life in the hospital in the ICU, the neonatal ICU unit, while his brother was home bonding with his mother, and while she was at home bonding with her son, she lived in fear of her other baby not thriving. We prayed, we visited the baby, did everything we could to support her. The baby was subsequently discharged about 5 to 6 months later, but he came home with a feeding tube, with a band on his esophagus, and with the fear that he wouldn't be able to hear, see, think, smell, taste, etc., etc. Well, what's in our belief system is that God can do anything. I felt like if the point of the exercise was for him to be dead, then he was already dead. But God saw fit to bring him back. And so we needed to know what was to be gained from all of this. What lesson was to be learned? What was this encounter about? So over the course of the past 2 years, my daughter worked in tandem with my sister, who's a level 3 case manager, to learn and understand what information the doctors were relaying to her. She and the children's father are not on good terms, so she didn't have support from him or his family. She was the sole provider and caregiver for these children. I would listen to my daughter at night crying herself to sleep because she was suffering from sleep deprivation. She was up all night with machines and buzzers going off and wondering if this is it, is this it, is this it? She's feeding the baby through a tube. As his brother's getting older and doing certain things, you can begin to recognize the delays in the other son. However, even though this is a situation that could have stopped her in her tracks and made her give up hope, I watched her dig her heels in deeper and be determined that you are not going to do anything differently than your brother. And so I watched her make him eat through his mouth. I watched her stand him up. I watched her reading to him and talking to him, and putting her face in his face and saying, listen, you are going to make it. You're going to do exactly what your brother's doing. And I can testify to this day, they're 2.5 years old. This young man is walking. He's trying to talk. He's recognizing colors and sounds. He loves music. He has great table etiquette. We always call his brother the Devin the Barbarian because he'll go ham with his hands, and Dylan likes to eat with his fork, and he has his napkin on his neck. His grandmother, I call him my foodie. He likes good food, good music, and grandma. At any rate, he's progressing nicely, and the doctors and the daycare providers are attributing that to the work that she did with him at home. So a situation that could have taken her down actually pushed her to say, you know what, I'm going back to school because I want to be a nurse. Now, if I take you on the journey backwards to 2011 when she graduated high school, she started going to school for clinical services. She initially wanted to be a psychologist, but she was entangled with her children's father at the time, and that was more important, and so she dropped out of college. So here we are 7 years later after having this encounter, this moment that could have stopped her in her tracks, that could have killed her, that could have made her lose her mind. Matter of fact, she did have a nervous breakdown at one point and had a little 1 week stay in a mental health facility. But the determination that she had to push forward and to come up and to remember how she was raised and to pull on her family at her time of need was so phenomenal that this baby is thriving. He's walking, he's laughing, he understands, he can see, he can hear. And it's all a credit to her taking that butterfly encounter, that transformative moment when her son died and was resurrected, and ownership lied with her to help him progress to the next level. She took that moment and utilized it as the platform to make a major life decision. So next month, this August, she's going to be going back to school, and she wants to be a registered nurse. And so we support that. So I said all that to say, take these encounters that you have and seek after more. We want to find out the meaning of these encounters. As a matter of fact, I trademarked the term more. I turned it into an acronym that stands for meaningful opportunities, relationships, and experiences. That means that every encounter that I have in life has a meaning, whether it's negative or positive. We can take it and spin it any way we want to. But at the end of the day, it all points in the direction of our future and our purpose. So I challenge you, women, to get your healing and your wholeness and turn about and reach back and grab someone in the next generation to pass your baton to. If you're interested in receiving a copy of this book, Butterfly Encounters, I'm giving away 3 of them today. Just text Butterfly Encounters to 301-257-2947, and then you and I can inbox, and I'll get your address and send it out to you right away. I thank you for listening, and I'm excited about the future, and I hope you are too. Thank you.